in case you're not there, where do I turn it off? In case you're not there at the end.
It should be a button that says stop recording. Yeah.
Yep. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Bruce.
Okay, so just to review, I sent you guys, I think it was on Wednesday morning last week, the gist of what we discussed from last time. Essentially that we modified the demographic variables, as you'll recall. We agreed that we would forego soliciting individual constituent input. We'd hold 2 community group meetings with Ward 3 Vision and Chevy Chase Voice. That we would, instead of getting individual constituent input, we develop the survey questionnaire, we test it with a group of citizens, residents, and thereby get their input. And that our next task was to proceed to look at the what questions, as we had discussed with the consultants, leaving to have a further discussion with them about the how, meaning how we would frame them, word them, and whatnot. So our work for tonight, or next task, is to discuss what questions. And there we are. I don't know if any of you have gotten any input from other people. I think we received something from Chevy Chase Voice, and maybe you separately have received some comments.
Well, yes, I have received comments, and I've also done some thinking about it. And I also used as a point of departure, Bruce, you wrote something with a bunch of bullet points. The discussion guide, I think it was.
Right. I had floated that as a draft for last time, as you'll recall.
Right.
And based again on Susan Geely actually had put those bullet points together based on the May 8th resolution of the board of the commission rather, that had taken the recommendation of the ZDD committee that a survey done by the ANC should consider these themes. Right. So that was the point of departure.
That's right. And at least from my point of view, that could be the point of departure for our discussion tonight. I don't know if other people agree with that and have access to it, but I'm looking at it right now.
Right. I have it on my screen.
Well, can I suggest that one way to start this process is to tackle the hardest part first. I mean, I don't think there's a lot of controversy about a new community center, although we need to bear down on some specifics. And I don't think there's a lot of controversy about the library. So the question is housing. And it seems to me that we need to wrestle with how to ask about housing. First, any housing on the site, and secondly, affordable housing. I guess, I mean, I don't know, does that, I mean, if you're willing to start at the hard end of things, I have a few suggestions. Is this
that's one of the hard ones. I think there might be a few more, but I'm okay to start with that.
Okay. I mean,
Yeah.
Peter?
Yes, ma'am.
I have a question though. Are we going to discuss, and this is for all the commissioners, the interview process with these 2 groups? I mean, when are we going to do that? Who's going to take lead on which interviews? What we didn't decide, I don't think, what questions we're going to ask. I mean, did you guys settle that at the last meeting?
No.
Well, we have a disagreement about the demographics. For one disagreement is whether to ask about longevity of living here. Lisa and I do not want that on there. And Peter and I believe Bruce do want it on there, right?
Yeah, but we're going to kick that to the full commission, right?
Yeah, and we
Full
can,
committee.
again,
What's the full committee, Peter?
Full commission.
Yeah, but on September 11th, but isn't that too late?
Yeah, good point.
We'll have to have a special meeting early September.
But Jim, the thing about the demographic variables, just to reiterate, I think, is that we can, I think for now, set them aside given this particular question, and also that we are going to come back and revisit them in light of the substantive questions as the consultants have suggested, because we may take a look at them in light of those substantive questions, like, oh, we don't really need to get this additional data. We're not going to use it in the crosstabs. So if we can park that for the moment, given the fact that we can't resolve it right this second, the one thing that and back, Peter, to what you were saying, I think, yes, to tackle the hard questions, keeping in mind we have two objectives and we have substantive questions for each of those objectives. And that first objective around asking people about key concerns is different from parsing the particulars regarding what people would like to see in an RFP. And if we can just partition the work we want to do tonight that way and focus on, and this gets back to Peter's point about the difficult questions regarding areas of concern that people have, right? So I would think it would be a great outcome of this meeting if we could identify not the questions, but again, what is it that we need to find out in the survey regarding key concerns? That's just my suggestion.
So, all right, so question number one, which we may want to ask or not, but we should discuss it, is do we want to ask people whether they are in favor of affordable housing or housing at all on the site, right?
So can I address that issue?
Yeah,
So-
yeah, go for it, Peter.
Let me say something to Lisa. I mean, I think that Brucey is right that we need to work on the what to know what we're going to ask these two groups. So, I mean, I think wrestling with the what in this meeting, it gets us towards the interview with the two groups.
So I might be under the different opinion of everybody, because I thought that we were interviewing these two groups to ask them what we should have in this survey.
Yeah.
So, I mean, to me, we don't need to, we're asking them the question to help us come up with the what.
Right,
Am I
Lisa.
wrong?
No, Lisa, I agree with that. And if your question just before this was, how are we going to approach these groups? When are we going to set up the meetings, right? So I think we want to resolve that and agree that we'll set up the meetings as soon as possible. We can decide who approaches which group. And with respect to what we talk to them about, you're absolutely right. We want to ask them their views on what we should be asking. Now, the only thing, again, that we had said a couple of meetings ago, that when we approached any group, we'd have a discussion guide. We wouldn't just go in and leave it
Right.
wide open.
Right.
Hence the document I gave us last time. So we already have a few areas that could guide us in discussing with each of these groups the survey questions. So there's that.
And Lisa, I guess I'd add, I think we need to have started the discussion of the what before we go to these groups. I mean, we can modify our opinions. We can utterly change our opinions based on what they say. But the notion of they are not voting for what the questions are. We're going to have to formulate them. And that's the really tough work here. And my suggestion is we get into that. It may be a messy meeting as a result, but I think that we ought to commit to making a decision towards the end of the meeting about the practicality of who do we interview and who does the interviews and how do they report back to this group. But if we don't get into the substance now, I'm concerned that we're going to dither around in August and not have anything ready for September. So does that, you okay with that?
So if the majority of you guys are okay with that, I'm not particularly okay with that. Because I want, this is me personally, I want the groups to have free range and to tell us what they think should be there. I really strongly oppose giving the groups access in advance to what our questions are going to be. I just don't think that's a good move. I would rather have the groups tell us, here are ideas we think you guys should consider when during the survey. And let them parse that out. And then we parse that out. But I think if we come to them with questions in advance, I just think it's going to change the nature of the discussion to something that I really was not looking for. That's just me.
Okay, but then the only business before us tonight in that case, if we take your approach, is to figure out the schedule for these meetings and who's going to do the interviews and how they're going to report back, because we're going to go in as blank slates to these conversations. And I just don't, I mean, you're the one who has said and pointed out repeatedly the tight schedule. So I don't think we in any way prejudice the groups by having a conversation about the substance here. I mean, but if you feel strongly about this, I'm all for short meetings. I mean, we've had enough meetings in the last week to last us why during a whole break.
Okay. Well, I would like to propose a middle ground between Lisa's possibly extreme position of going in there, just letting it rip, whatever they say, and coming in there with a bunch of topics that we've decided. What about if we tonight develop a list of general topics that we think might be on the survey? We ask them first, what do you think should be on the survey? And we listen to everything they have to say. And at the end, if they when they're finished, we say, we may look and see, well, now you didn't mention X or Y, and then we ask them, what about X or Y? Do you think that should be on the survey or not? And because I'd be interested, it may, if maybe they say, well, we didn't think about that, but yeah, that should be on there. Or maybe they'll say, no, that should not be on there.
I like that. I do think that's a good middle ground. If we say, like, here, if we introduce to them, here are the topic areas we're thinking about, and just give them the topic area, like density, green space, whatever that may be, and ask them their opinion on those areas. What should we ask in particular to that area? Let them tell us that information. And then the final question could be, what did we leave out? I mean, I just think that giving them the free voice to say, hey, ANC, this is what you also should consider, is really crucial. But I do like your idea, Jim, if we could just give that header as a topic and say, you tell me what you think about density. You tell me what you think about affordable housing. You tell me what you think about green space, and let them talk about it. But then also give them the opportunity to say, in addition to those topics, here's something else I think you guys should survey the community about.
Okay, but Lisa, look, I'm fine with doing that. I'm fine with doing that. It's going to make this meeting very, very short. I mean, we need to schedule these things. I mean, putting the topic headings in, as I said last week, is simple. We can start off. It's affordable housing. It's height. It's density. It's open space, green space. It's parking. And in response to that, I think this was when you were offline. Susan said, well, that doesn't tell us, the consultants, what we want to know about each of these areas. So that, but if we get the first definition of them from these groups, that's fine. But then, I mean, unless we have a big disagreement about these subject headings, I mean, all we really have to do is who's going to do the interview and when are they going to do it? And we come.
Well, I think we do have a few things to talk about. For example, when you talk about parking, I want to ask about public transportation, because I reject the assumption that the only way to get around is by automobile.
Okay, then we have to ask questions beyond parking, but
correct. We need to ask questions about how are people going to go to and from. that does not presuppose automobile.
So guys, before we get into particulars, can I just kind
Yeah.
of come back to the structure of this meeting and what we're going to try to accomplish tonight? I hear Lisa, I understand we have an agreement, I believe, Jim, you're middle way in terms of how we approach engaging these two groups.
This
The
is
discussion, the discussion guide, by the way, is not something you give a group in advance. You don't hand it out and say, this is what we're talking about. You have it at the ready to use as you see fit. And I
Yes.
think that's what we're discussing here.
Mhm.
Nothing prevents us now from ourselves discussing what questions. Because at the end of the day, we're going to take their input into account. We're not writing the questionnaire yet. We're still discussing, we're still formulating, thinking about what should be on the questionnaire. So if we're in agreement that we will engage the groups in the way that we've just described, and I think agreed, we're middle way, then the only question is who contacts the groups and when do we set up the meetings, who participates? We can resolve those quickly, and then we can have a discussion right now with the people that have tuned in, and there are 16 people on the call regarding what questions, and just have that conversation to begin to look at what our consultants have advised us to do, which is get clear on what you want to ask. So on that point, if that's okay, then who contacts the groups? When do we do the meetings? I think it'd be great if the four of us, if all of us, if we're available, are in those conversations, so we all hear what the groups have to say.
I'm fine with that.
But I don't understand, Bruce, because we haven't settled yet on a list of topics that we are going to either introduce in a general way to them, and or if some of them aren't mentioned at the end, say, well, what about this? We have to
Right.
agree on that. And Peter thinks that we all agree on it, and I don't agree that we all agree.
Okay, so we have a starting place, which again, whether you wish to start here or not, I mean, there is a starting place, which is the list of bulleted points that I had shared last week as a draft discussion guide.
That's
We
right.
could-
Bruce,
we
why
can-
don't you go back over those? And
Okay.
you guys want to use that as the starting place to say yay or nay?
Yeah,
Okay.
I do.
Let's
Okay.
do that.
Okay,
Bruce, can you share your screen? So the
yeah,
audience can-
I can share the screen.
Let me make you co-host. Hang on. Okay. It should be good.
Okay. Not that. I don't know why this thing has difficulty picking out the particular item. Hang on.
It started sharing now.
Okay, can you see the screen?
Yep.
Okay, all right, so these were the bulleted points. Again, just as prompts from the conversation, so we can kind of go through those. Peter Goslin was referring just a little bit ago about the general issues regarding redevelopment of the Civic Core site. And I think, Lisa, your point is to start the conversation by simply asking people about their views and what they believe we should be asking on the survey.
Yeah. And
Yeah,
I mean, even what you have here is pretty descriptive. So I kind of look at this as like an interview guide. And maybe like we start off by saying, what are your general views on redevelopment of Civic Core? And, you know, if they give their free text explanation, talk about it, and then maybe they leave something out that you have like on the bullet. So like say the first one, views on whether the Civic Core site should be redeveloped. I don't
right.
have a problem with us then asking that as a follow-up question. I'm
Right.
just trying to make sure we don't use these as leading questions.
I hear you. Yeah.
But
Okay.
wait, I'm missing something here, Lisa, because you're talking as though we're asking them for their views And I thought we were asking them for their questions.
Yeah, yeah, and I think, that's a good clarification. I mean, we have views here, but we could reword that to say, what should we ask on a survey about the redevelopment of the Civic Course site?
Because
She's
isn't
asking-
that really what we're about here? We're trying to get
That's what I thought. Yeah,
community input on how to do our survey. The survey
Yeah.
is questions, not
right,
answers.
Right.
Right.
So Jim, just to refine that, she's asking to ask them about their views on the questions. So it's what they feel we should be asking on the survey.
Okay, all right.
Yeah. And
Okay.
you've got categories here, the
Yeah.
general views, potential design elements, the difficult question to some extent of affordable housing, that whole category of potential impact on the community concerning school, infrastructure, parking, transportation. Again, these are just things in the discussion with them that serve as prompts after we hear them, as Jim was describing. And we then can use these, and we can have some other things, but this gives us a set of items that we would be able to draw on to draw them out and hear their further views on what they believe we should be asking. And we don't have to parse these right now exactly anyway, because the conversation will be very dynamic. Things will come up. It strikes me that there's enough here for us to use if we feel it's appropriate to use to hear their further views on what.
Okay, I don't know where Lisa went. She just cut out.
Okay.
I'm here. I'm
Oh,
still here.
All right. So are you going to react to what Bruce said?
I think he's right. I mean, I think we, use this as our guide, and I mean, tonight we could just see what else is missing that we think we should add on, or what folks in the audience also think we should add on. But I think the general views, the potential design elements that captures everything from height, density, lot coverage, green space, affordable housing as part of redevelopment, and then potential impact on the community. So I
Yes.
think those 4 general categories, and excuse me in advance, folks, for the noise, but those 4 core categories, I think really kind of captures everything, and then have that other caveat of other, where they could suggest additional things.
One thing I don't see here is questions about ownership or rental of the housing, whether it's affordable or not.
Okay. We can add that.
And Jim, what about adding something like a transportation question, like you were talking about?
Well, he has impact on parking and transportation.
I'm fine. I mean, we can say
Got
that
it.
we're taking a broader view there. I mean,
No, when he says transportation, I'm fine, as long as we, the transportation means that
yeah, how do
something.
you get to and from the civic core?
Yeah, right. No, then I'm good with that. That touches that base.
So I'm adding dynamically here, Jim. I just put in own rent as a prompt, as a
Yeah,
category.
that's
Okay.
good. Yep.
Okay.
Now, when you say outdoor areas for recreation and green open space, I'm thinking of something like a little, maybe just a tad more like how do you want to use that outdoor space or something like that? I mean, that's a little vague, isn't it?
So your question is whether we would want to ask about not only do they prefer these recreational areas and outdoor space, but how they would use them.
Yeah.
So the language from the resolution that you're drawing from, Bruce, says outdoor areas for recreation, adult, youth, and children, and green/open space for congregating.
Okay. Well, I think we probably can fold that in here, Jim, in terms of A, they prefer it, and then B, we could ask how they intend to use it. The only thing, and this is not to take us off in another direction, so let me just mention this and we can park it. We are mindful of other surveys that have been done recently, including the DemPed survey, which was
Right.
all over how people
Right.
intend to use and prefer to use and so forth. So we have it's very substantial amount of data there to have in mind.
Yeah, but people were questioning that.
I know.
survey.
I know
And-
it did. 1,700 people responded though, which is a very high, relatively very high response rate for these kinds of things. But I hear you. Yeah.
And the truth is that it just focused on these two public institutions,
Right.
relatively little on the open space and none on the housing, transportation, infrastructure issues.
Right.
So.
Yeah. Yeah.
All, it seems to me it focused on the easy things and not the hard things.
Right, right. So just to know, this could serve as the basis for, as we're talking about, helping us in the conversations with the two groups. Irrespective of the conversations with the two groups, the four of us, as the members of the survey committee, with the full commission at the end of the day, endorsing any recommendation or not that we put forward, are on the hook for the survey. And therefore, when we talk about what we want to know through the survey, we're looking at these topics, and there may be others. But I think it's a good thing even now, in the time we have, another half an hour, to talk about what we think we need to be asking. And this harks back to Peter's opening question. I don't know if we're prepared to do that, Lisa, if you're good with how we've discussed engaging the groups. I guess we just
Yeah.
need to, I just
The
need
only
to,
thing
yeah.
the only thing I would add, Bruce, is if we go to the folks on the line to see if they have any additional suggestions that we didn't take into consideration, if there's anything that they would like to add to this part.
Yeah, so just on that point, if so, they're providing input into our discussion with the two groups. We can also have them provide their input into the what period, right? For us as a committee.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
have,
Harry-
I'm sorry.
Harry Barnes has his hand up. Go ahead, Harry.
Good. Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Great.
This is Cheryl, I think, right? Hey, Cheryl.
Hi. So good evening, everybody. In the last meeting, we understood that there was a Monday deadline for the submission of input. So we really worked very hard with our supporters, with our petitioners, with our core group to get as much input as possible and to tabulate all of that and to put it together for you to submit to you yesterday. And I would like to know if anyone has looked at that submission. And I would like to know if Washington Interfaith Network intends to submit their input. And why didn't they adhere to the deadline?
I'm sorry, Cheryl, I did not look at it so far. And I'm a little confused about the deadline. Did we set a deadline last week? I mean, we're sort of inventing the process as I go along.
Yes, you did. And we considered it a very heavy homework assignment over the weekend to
I will-
get that into you. And we dropped everything because you said it's due Monday.
Right. Well,
So we took that very seriously because you said that time is of the essence. We need to get this done. We need to get it in. And
Yeah.
we really, dropped literally everything to get that to you yesterday. And now I'm hearing that you haven't looked at it.
So Cheryl, just a note, we can go commissioner by commissioner in terms of who's looked at it. I have looked at it. And I'd be happy, and we collectively, I think, would be happy. This is an open committee meeting for you to articulate some of what is in that document and trust that everyone will take a look at it, will take it on board. And then, of course, there'll be a scheduled meeting, right, to follow. So there's going to be full opportunity to incorporate into our discussion your views. So why not go ahead if you feel prepared to do so and articulate some of the high points of what you put in the document?
Hey, Bruce, before that occurs, what is the issue with the deadline? I have no idea what's being discussed here.
I think we may have mentioned in the last conversation that we were looking at a deadline of, because again, we're all mindful of the time frame here, that we would seek to have input from the groups by July 31st, which was yesterday. And so that's, I believe, Cheryl, that's what you're referring to?
It is.
Okay. If we're slightly behind that, Cheryl, we can, as a committee, I'm not speaking for everybody, I'll speak as one commissioner, ask for your indulgence that we take the time to look at the document you submitted. I reiterate that Chevy Chase Voice is one of the two groups already indicated that we'd be talking to. So there's going to be a full opportunity to sit with your group and talk. With that, I'm simply saying, here we are on an open line right now with another 25 minutes to go. Feel free to give us any highlights of the document right now, if you'd like.
If you have looked at the document, Bruce, you know that it is extensively researched, very in-depth, and you know, to the layperson, pretty complicated stuff.
Right.
I don't think that this is the appropriate sounding board to go to the community with the questions, but I'm sure that will that we develop, but I'm sure that will arise soon.
Right. Let me ask you a question, Cheryl, on that. I understand, and we can take it all on board and look at it in depth and have, again, further discussion. But on the topic at hand here, which is what does the survey need to ask the community about? The what questions? Among the things that you put in the document that you've sent to all of us, tell us one or two what questions, what areas, themes that you think are really critical for this survey to address.
Our survey really, our questions, our topics really address what the residents, your constituents, want to see on that site. Not necessarily what the ANC wants to see on the site, but what the residents who use this site, not necessarily just in Chevy Chase, because people beyond 20015 use the site. What do the people who live here really want on this site? And I think that our submission goes into that in great depth. I mean, I'm happy to share my screen right now and go through it line by line, if that's what you think is advisable.
Well, I think what's helpful is just to have us be mindful of the broad what questions. And Cheryl, let me process a bit your input in terms of the two broad objectives that we have for the survey, which I know you're familiar with. One of those, the first of those, is to ensure that the survey addresses or asks about key concerns the community has, which you're speaking to, I believe. The other objective of the survey is to solicit information that can contribute to the RFP, if in fact an RFP goes forward and there's redevelopment of the civic core, so that the commission has the benefit of the community's input in full on what it wishes to see in a redeveloped civic core. So those are the two broad objectives. If we look at the first objective, areas of key concern to the community, talk to us about those, as opposed to pulling up your document, which we'll take a look at. Maybe just mention several things that you think are really important in terms of the what questions that the committee needs to be mindful of.
Well, you've obviously hit the first one in that, do the residents want to see housing on this site in combination with the library and the community center and the commons? And is that even, let alone whether or not that's feasible? Do they want to see housing on the site that is affordable, is deeply affordable, is somewhat affordable? Do they want to see housing that is market rate, luxury housing, all the different types of housing that we have put in our questions to you? what kinds of things do we want to see in the outdoor areas? What are some alternatives to, seeing housing on this particular site? If it's not possible to combine all of these things, which a number of city planners in the neighborhood have been very vocal about, that this is just pie in the sky. So, I think we've tackled all of these issues: the parking, the overstressed infrastructure, the crowded schools, the taxed electrical system. We all suffered power outages this past weekend, and in spite of that, still got this material to you yesterday. So I think we have a pretty good handle on what the residents, your constituents, want to see on this site and on Upper Connecticut Avenue. We've heard from over 900 of them at this point, and they're still talking to us every day about this. They do not want to see any diminution of green space on that site, which currently has approximately 65% green space.
So Cheryl, let me ask you this. Could we, using your input as a point of departure, ask others who are on the call about this question of whether or not the Civic Core site should incorporate housing? That's something that Peter started with and Jim referred to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I want to say that I did have a look at that document, maybe not as, didn't spend as much time with it as it merited, but I was going to say this before we got to Harry Barnes, that one thing I took from it that I wanted in our document assumes affordable housing. And one item I liked about their document was the asking a bigger question: do you want housing there at all? Before we assume that affordable housing is a piece of it. That's a question they asked. I thought that was a good one. I also like that they get into some of the details of what type of affordable housing, and they have divided it up into the three pieces that are normally used, using area median income. I have to say, one thing that I did not like about it at all was the final question that says, should your responses on this survey determine what happens to the Chevy Chase Commons and Upper Connecticut Avenue? I think that's, that's not an appropriate question at all, according to me, at least. So there's good and bad there, in my view.
Peter.
Yeah, I want to say that I do think that we need to ask base questions about, do you want housing there at all? But I think we have to recognize that I think the challenge we face is understanding that question is going into a highly polarized community. And so we need to try to ask it in ways that don't lead residents in one way or the other, but try to set some context. So I've been trying to fiddle with how you write questions that would ask some context. You personally, want to have additional housing in the neighborhood. And then a second question that would go, if you could be convinced, if there was firm evidence that X%, most people who work in schools, fire stations, police stations, and the stores and the service providers for this neighborhood can't afford to live here, would that change your answer? In other words, we need to try to set some context to the base question goes into a completely polarized community. And what you're going to get is a bunch of people who say never, and you're going to get a bunch of people who say, yes, we have to build 90-story buildings and da 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 da. And the challenge, I think, for us is to understand that that's the world it's going into, to ask modifying questions that aren't leading questions, but that's to say, how about if this were the context? And that is also so in another way, which is that, and Jim, to that the point you're making about that last question. I think one of the things that has made it so difficult for us in conducting, trying to play a role in this debate is that the city is very set right now on doing housing at that site.
Right.
We need to both, I mean, one of the problems I think we're going to have is if the mayor stays set on that, it seems to me our role is to get a deal that comes closest to satisfying the mayor, but satisfying this community first and foremost. And if we end up with a situation of just say no, we need to be able to ask questions and also ask people questions in the context of where the city is now. And I don't claim to know how you frame those questions, and particularly so that they're not leading. They don't basically say, we have a, historical obligation.
Right. Well, let me say that there's some good points and good content to the document that Harry Barnes submitted, but the questions are tendentious, definitely leading, and I think we're gonna have to watch that part. And also to your point, Peter, the both our council members in 3 and 4 have run on putting Fruman said he ran on putting housing there, and he won 75% of the vote, and the mayor won that.
There.
So there's, in a way, it's decided by our democratic process.
So
They
guys,
want, right?
let me just intervene and just say that we're sort of, I hear all that. Our focus here is the what. What do we want to ask on the survey? And I think we're in agreement that there needs to be a question about our citizens' views regarding the proposed development at the Civic Core. And I would love for anyone else who is on the call, members of the community, there are 17 participants, subtract 4 of us, that means 13 in the community. If anyone has a view as to what should be on the questionnaire, what we should be asking about, not what the question is exactly, that comes later, but what topics we should be addressing.
Could I just finish up one thing? And that is to encourage the ANC to read the document that not Harry Barnes or Cheryl Barnes, but Chevy Chase Voice submitted to you yesterday, that Andrea Rosen worked very, very hard on all weekend. It is simply not fair to ignore that this is a extrapolation of many, many comments we've heard from over 900 people. And
Hey,
you
Cheryl.
haven't even reviewed it.
Hey, Cheryl, Cheryl, let me just interrupt. I have seen it. I've reviewed it. Jim has obviously reviewed it. He was just referring to it. So we thank you for it. You had heard, and I can understand why, that there was a deadline of July 31st. We thank you for coming in with the document by the deadline. We're going to take it on board. We're going to meet with your group. We're hearing from you now. So we're fully going to take into account Chevy Chase Voice's views and concerns, rest assured. No question about it. I'm just interested, as we are discussing, maybe Peter, you want to go back to the what question and talk about what we want to ask about?
Well, all I'd say is a formulation of the what that says, ask a bold question, only a bold question. Do you want more housing here or don't you? Do you want more housing on the community center site, community center library site, or don't you? Is not adequate. Because we know from our experience as commissioners, our experience as residents, that this community is very polarized. And so the question, look, you're listening to somebody who was like a philosophy major in the 70s. I mean, John Rawls tried to come up with a theory of justice, and he kept going, well, you have to make a decision. You need to make decisions, behind the veil, because you don't know what position you're going to be allotted. Well, that sounds wacky, but at some level, we need to set context around the bold questions. And so that goes to the what too, I just say. I mean, just a question about housing ain't enough.
So we have, again, a number of people on the call. Would anyone, Robin, please go ahead.
You're muted, Rob.
Okay, yep. So
I think you all know that I'm a little skeptical, Stuart and I are, about the city, and it's not a very clean, what question, but my fundamental what question is, what promise is the city willing to make to really put in affordable housing? And what does that mean? And what are the legal avenues for making them stick to it? Because as we talked about last night in the emergency ANC meeting, where we all discussed a house being raised under the city's nose, my feeling about housing on that site and affordable housing on that site is completely tied to whether or not I believe that developers will stick to their promises and that the city will make them. And there's just been lots of evidence touching my property that they have zero accountability. So I don't know how you make that a what question, but if that question isn't answered, then I have to go back to the camp of no housing on that site.
So Robin, just to clarify, you're thinking about a question that the community would answer or a question the city would answer?
A question that the city you would ask, if you agree that housing belongs to the site, what kind of commitment would you like to see from the city that this will really happen? If you were willing to give up your green space on this site, what kind of commitment do you want from the city? What kind of recourse do you want if that doesn't happen?
Right. Peter, I think you wanted to respond, but Karen, Karen Caston wants in. So Karen, I'll come to you next.
Well, I just say that I do think that that's I don't know how to formulate, but I do think that's a question for residents. What would you take as sufficient assurance that the development? I mean, ultimately,
Exactly.
I hear that. I think the way to do it would be how much, what percentage of it would be affordable housing? You can't just say yes or no, because that's often been the problem in the past. And also
what affordable means.
that's right. How there are
The level, it's the level. It's the
Three different
level of
levels.
affordability.
That's right.
And some of this is,
The devil is in the details.
I don't know if Ron,
I'm not
Ron,
done talking. I haven't even started
Okay.
talking.
Okay, let me just clarify. You could probably add to, sorry, Karen. But
I haven't had my turn,
regulation.
Lisa.
Okay, go ahead, Karen. Go ahead. I was just trying to add clarity.
Okay, so a couple of things to go back to what was said earlier about asking people, do you want housing on the site? And then that's likely to trigger a sort of polarized response. I'm wondering if there's a way to put out that question and say, now, before you answer that, consider these possibilities. Before you answer, before you check that box, consider these things. And I heard someone say something about workforce housing. How about, the people who work in the area being able to live here? That's a good thing or not, et cetera, et cetera. The other thing I want to say is that the outline that the ANC provided that was just put on screen a few minutes ago, I found very difficult to grasp, because things like green space, transportation were sort of concealed under the topic design or something of that kind. I think it'd be much better to be less abstract and in the outline and in the way you're thinking about it. And so to have actually green space, housing, transportation as the lead thematic question elements, and that people could understand that and think about it in a clearer way.
Okay, that's great, Karen. Thank you very much for the input. That's very good. Lisa, did you, Sharon Lauritsen is on, wants to.
Yeah, let
wants
me
to
just
speak.
clarify. Let me just add some clarification that might help on the other question. There's some mandate by the district in terms of the percentage of affordable housing. If development, say, uses IV or IV plus. So we could probably provide that. I don't know if Ron Eigner is on, but he often talks about that.
Yeah, but
I think
that's
there's
not
a-
any good, Lisa, because what
Okay.
the city
Okay,
means,
okay, Karen, please.
what the city means by IZ is 50%
Karen, please,
AI.
please. Let's
Okay, go ahead,
not
Lisa.
interrupt. Please, let's not interrupt. I'm not here to debate what the city is doing. I'm just here to get information. I understand IV. I understand IV plus. That's not appropriate. I think in most of our affordable housing scenarios, it offers too little. But that's the law right now. I'm just trying to provide the audience with clarity that some of these issues are in statute by the District of Columbia. And we need to provide that information to our constituents. Whether or not they like it or not is clearly up to them. But some of this is in statute in terms of development, and if they develop so much, how much affordable housing according to whatever program is supposed to go into it, and also in terms of affordability levels. So I think that affordability level that you often hear Ron Eichner talk about at the 30% of affordable housing level is 50 to 80%, which I also think is very high, but that is something that is out there in district law. We need to make sure we put that out so that people, and I believe it was Stewart's wife that was talking, so that she understands already what's currently in statute. Not to say that we can't ask the district to go above that, but that is a piece of information that we need to make available to the public.
Okay, Lisa, thank you. We've got 3 people who'd like to come in, and we only have 5 minutes remaining or 4 minutes remaining in the conversation. So Sharon, you're first, and then Patricia, Maida's next, and then Elizabeth Nagy, you're next, and that'll probably take us to the hour. Go ahead, Sharon.
Yeah, thanks, Bruce. So I think this feeds into what a couple of you already talked about. So I'm relatively new to this discussion, and in fact, local politics altogether. But I think it would be very helpful for the survey that it also provides facts. And I'll point to the Chevy Chase news and notes that was sent out today, which had some very interesting facts about, for example, housing and development already in Chevy Chase. I know I was one of the people that answered one of the previous surveys. I had no idea that that survey was tied to any of the conversations that we're having now. And I think there are probably an awful lot of people like me in the neighborhood that are not as close to this as all of you. And so in designing a survey, you need to be able to provide facts. It needs to be in plain English, and you have to assume that not everybody is so wrapped up in all of the ins and outs that all of you have been involved in for so many years. So just a suggestion. Thank you.
Great, Sharon. Thank you very much. Great to see you, by the way.
Bruce, let me
Yeah.
just add to that to let her know and the audience know that we are working on an FAQ. You want to discuss that a little bit? Some of us have been trying to put together just that, a FAQ that also has like terminology. So like, what is IV? What is IV plus? What does the Office of Planning do? We're trying to add that to the final survey. So it kind of gives a baseline of information that would help people in making their choices.
Thanks, Lisa. Patricia, are you still with us? I don't see you yet on the screen.
I'm here.
Okay, Patricia, please go ahead. I think
Okay,
you wanted to speak.
yeah. I think, as Cheryl points out, and as you have on your outline, the first thing that you would have to have in your questionnaire is, do you support putting housing on the site with the library and the community center. Now, among the people whom you're going to send this questionnaire to, I think you should send it to the parents of public schools students, many of whom use this, walk to the library. You should find out the supporting groups that work in this library. Now, I know that at one point I could not use the library because the parking was so poor. I mean, there were so few spaces. Many people drive to that library and they will need parking. I think you should ask, what do you want in the new, in a renovated community center? Do you want classrooms? Do you want more courses? Do you want a theater? What do you want in the library? There are many people who use this library weekly. They bring their children for story hour. There are seniors who go there every day and read the newspaper, meet their friends there. It has many different functions. And the green space is imperative for some people. It's the only place they can go if they live on the avenue and sit in the shade and read. It's a place to play. My child is now grown, but when I went to the library, he would love to go into the playground, and I could take him to the playground, amuse him, walk him to the library, go to the story hour, bring our shopping bag with books. It should be our community center and our library. We pay taxes. It's our community. It's not the mayor. She's going to be here for maybe how many, 2 more years, and then she'll be gone. Who knows? We're going to be here. We engage with this community. We need to put our desires out front, and we need to ask the people who actually use these facilities what they want and what they need. We also need housing, but that is a different issue, and there are many more options for it. It does not have to be in that exact space on Connecticut Avenue.
Thank you, Patricia. Elizabeth and then Mary, and I'm mindful of the time. It's 8:01. Go ahead, Elizabeth.
Okay, well, can you hear me?
Yep.
Yeah, okay, great. I'd like to say I really liked Patricia's comments. But I would also like to say that I'm concerned that the comment that the community is really polarized keeps being made, because I think it perpetuates a stereotype that doesn't necessarily exist. I think the community wants affordable housing. Whether the community wants affordable housing in that exact location or any housing in that location is another question. But I think if you feed into the narrative that the community is polarized, that's what you're going to get, is a polarized community. And as to Mr. Nash's point about not wanting to put a proviso in the survey that the comments that the people make will actually be taken into consideration, I got to ask, why wouldn't you want to tell people that there is some actual point to filling out the survey and that their views will actually be considered? And I think that that's really wrong-minded. I'm sorry.
All right, I'm going to respond to that because that's not what I said. The
Well,
question,
it sounds to me like
the
it's what
question
you
is
said.
written is, should your responses on this survey determine what happens? That I mean, inform, effect, shape, certainly is fine. But when you say determine, that makes it seem as though the survey, whatever the survey says, is what we have to do. And we don't even have the power to do that. So the question needs to be reworded, rethought if we're going to include it at all.
You have to make it clear that people's views will be seriously taken into account and that it's the community's views that matter.
Of course, but of course they're going to, that's why we're doing the survey, is to take them into
and I
account.
have to
But
say,
don't think for a moment it's going to determine anything, this survey. It's not going to determine anything. It'll shape and inform.
I do sometimes wonder whether anything that taxpayers say or do informs what the city does. I mean, it's very frustrating. I've lived in the city for close to 50 years. And I've lived in Chevy Chase for most of those years.
Well,
and I just find this whole process
Let her
According
speak.
to our council member
Can I
Fruman,
finish, please? Is it okay if I finish? Okay, I find this whole process very frustrating. I've been to many ANC meetings, and I would like to think that our views are actually taken into account and absorbed, and it's not just 5 people or 7 people, you know, who have views of their own and come from a place that get their own way as opposed to what the community wants. And that's really, I'll stop there.
Elizabeth, thank you very much. And just for the benefit of everybody, since we build these meetings as an hour and there is a time management issue here, we can run over, and we are running over. We're at 8:05. I know, Peter, you wanted to respond, but Mary Callahan has her hand up, and I think Cheryl had her hand up again. So let's try to get to everybody, and then we'll wrap up. Go ahead, Peter.
Very, very quickly, Elizabeth, I don't think I don't intend to either endorse polarization or encourage polarization, but I think if you ask, I think it's important that we ask very direct questions, but I then think it's important to say, as the previous speaker before you said, that we need to try to put it in essentially re-ask it in different contexts so that we get a feeling for, I mean, perhaps we end up, it was Patricia who suggested this, perhaps, or no, actually it was Karen Caston who was suggesting this. I mean, you know, it may turn out that there's a resounding no housing at the community center library site. There may well turn out to be that, but asking that question and taking it just from the bald-faced question, do you want housing there? We have to face the reality of the community that we have before us and try to sort of give a little granularity to it. And as with regard to the city, it's important that our and your voices be heard on the community that you live in and that you support. But we've got to find a way where this ANC says to the community, without being just trying to be realistic, this train's coming towards us. Now, there are multiple ways we can deal with that, but what we don't want to do is bicker among ourselves so much that we don't have any answer to it. And I don't know how I mean, what I think we were trying to say with regard to what I think Jim was trying to say is that we've got to face some realities about where the city is right now. Now, how we face them.
Yeah.
Be open.
and not just the city, council member Fruman said that he ran on affordable housing in the civic core. He said, I said it 100 times, and he said he won 75% of the vote in the civic core. Now,
Let's
okay,
be honest about the election.
that's democracy, right?
So let's go to Mary Callahan and then back to Cheryl. Elizabeth, if you wanted to respond to anything since they're speaking to you, maybe I'll go back to you right now. Is there anything further you'd like to add, Elizabeth?
Actually, I might just wait for a minute if that's okay. I'd like to.
Okay,
hear
Mary,
what
go
other people
ahead.
say.
Thank you,
Hi.
Elizabeth. Hey, Mary.
Can you hear
Yes.
me?
Yep.
I'm a little late into this conversation because I was out of the country at the beginning of these meetings. But the decision has been made to focus this survey on the civic core.
This one.
It's about the redevelopment of the civic core to understand what the community's views are on it. Yes.
Okay, then my first suggestion is that there be a question at the end of the survey for folks about what other issues they might want to have surveyed for the community. Now, the following. I have, I think, a different understanding or feeling about affordable housing for this area. We live here because it's peaceful. We live here because we're close to Rock Creek Park. I have an oversized yard, and I have been working for a number of months to try to figure out a way to buy and build a tiny house on that yard for cost, for affordable housing. And I think there needs to be some consideration, if not in the survey, about what's going on with zoning in this neighborhood so that they're allowed to build the Twin Towers. And at the same time, other folks are not allowed or being given a very difficult time about building affordable housing on their own property for teachers, firefighters, policemen, etc., who live in the neighborhood.
Okay, Mary, thank you very much. And again, I'm mindful of the time. It's 10 after 8.
Hey,
I
Bruce?
want- Yeah, Lisa, go ahead.
Can I just clarify real quick of Mary? Mary, are you referring to ADU?
To what, Lisa?
Accessory dwelling.
Yeah,
Accessory dwelling
ADUs.
unit, Mary. Yeah. Are you
I
referring
don't-
to building a unit, some type of structure on your property that would be an
Yes, that's
accessory
what I'm
dwelling
talking
unit
about.
that you could rent for housing?
Yes. And thank you, Lisa, for giving me the information about the DIMPED survey last night.
Yeah, no problem. And I'm gonna send you something. I don't know if I have your email, but we did something on ADUs. I just want to send it to you.
All right,
Great.
because I'm willing to give it a go.
Okay,
Great.
thanks.
Thank you, Mary. Thank you, Lisa. Elizabeth, was there anything further you wanted to say?
No, I think Cheryl had something she wanted to say.
No, I did. I know Cheryl. I'm going to go to Cheryl next, and then with Cheryl, I
Okay.
think with
No.
commissioners, then we'll wrap up. Go ahead, Cheryl. You're muted, Cheryl.
I am. Thank you very much for reminding me to unmute. There's a lot going on here. There's a lot to unpack. Mary Callahan, please get in touch with me about the ADU. I'm somewhat of an expert on that subject. And yes, it provides affordable housing in communities all over Washington, D.C.
I'd love to do that.
Not everyone in my group agrees with the current zoning code to build ADUs, but I'm a big proponent of that. Back to the survey. I think that it would be a good idea for everyone on the commission all the commissioners to read very carefully what we've submitted to you and to, regroup next week and talk about what we've submitted to you, because what we have submitted to you by the deadline goes far and above what you have discussed tonight. It gets into all of the weeds, it gets into all of the details, and it's clear. It's very clear and it's very fair. It really focuses on what this community wants to see on that site. I do think that it's high time that everybody gets to have a voice in this.
Right. So Cheryl, let me just say, and I'm not speaking on behalf of the other commissioners, I'm just speaking on my own personal behalf. As I indicated, I took a look at what you submitted. It's great input. It's exactly what we hope to have from Chevy Chase Voice and comparably Ward 3 Vision, the two groups we've agreed that we would be
Submit
meeting with.
anything, Bruce. I'm sorry. They didn't.
No, but eventually, whenever we get that from
What's
them,
the
the
purpose of a
conversation.
deadline?
So, well, I understand, and we're open to taking the input, and we'll take the input. We're going to be holding conversations over the next few days or week. We'll be back in touch with you individually to set those conversations up. The thing, Cheryl, that I would just flag as something that we can talk about when we get into unpacking your survey would be the level of knowledge that it presumes recipients of the survey have about the issues. That's something for us to talk about, not right now. It's kind of down in the weeds, as you say. And also back to what exactly we need to hear from the community on in terms to inform our collective view of the redevelopment idea of the civic core. So I just want to say thank you for your input. I appreciate that you submitted it by the deadline, and we will be back in touch with you on that. Trust that we will honor the input.
I don't think that you have to assume that this is, that you need to send out a dumbed down survey. This is a very intelligent community, extremely well educated community. And I think that simply providing them with the background that we worked hard to write as part of the survey will help them to understand all of these issues.
I got it. And you know what? We'll talk about that in depth when we engage with you guys, and we'll go
Thank you.
through it all.
I
Okay,
appreciate
so
that.
we're gonna wrap up. It's 8:15. We're 15 minutes past time. Does any commissioner have any other comments?
Well, what are our next steps?
Next
Elizabeth
steps are to
has her
set up
hand
the meetings with Chevy Chase Voice and with Ward 3 Vision. We'll talk offline about who takes the lead on doing that. We'll do that, I trust, over the next few days or week. We'll get that done. We are also continuing to discuss, as we've done tonight, the what questions for the survey. We're in the process right now of soliciting input and formulating what the questions will be on the survey. We're on August 1 here today. We have the month of August to design the survey, take input, design the survey, test the survey, leading up to fielding the survey in September. So that's the timeline we've identified previously, and we're on track for that. So that is where we are. Are we all good for the moment?
Elizabeth, take Elizabeth's comment, please.
Well, she had her hand up previously, and I think her hand's just up still. Elizabeth, would you like to mention anything else?
Okay.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that, but people sometimes leave their hand up,
Oh, I know.
right?
Thank you.
Yeah, okay. Does anyone else in the community have any comment to make before we close? I don't want to foreclose the discussion and not get you in. Are we all good for now? Okay, so
Yeah.
okay, Cal, go ahead. We'll close with you, Cal.
So this is not a thing. It's a comment that I have about what I just heard. That folks representing Chevy Chase Boys keep saying that they represent what the community wants. And my understanding of Chevy Chase Voice was formed. Well, actually, that's what I read in the invitation. My hope when I heard that there was a group called Chevy Chase Voice was going to be a group that would actually go and find out the diversity of opinions. But when the actual announcement came to the listserv, it was said, these are people who are opposed to this and opposed to that and opposed to the other, come join us. So I feel uncomfortable when any group says we represent the voice or the wants and needs of the community at large. So I'm going to ask folks to stop saying that.
I got it, Cal. You know what? That's a conversation.
We
I know
don't
that's a
really-
conversation you want to have offline with Chevy Chase Voice, but I appreciate that comment. I think we're good. We're going to wrap up the meeting and thank everybody. We have our next steps that we're going to be taking as indicated in terms of engaging Chevy Chase Voice, Ward 3 Vision. We will set up those conversations, solicit that additional input. Just to know, every Tuesday at 7, except when there's a conflict with the Raise Committee, we have the meetings at 7 o'clock on Tuesdays. It's the same Zoom link. We'll publish the announcements further in the community so that everyone knows. And with that, we will thank everybody for participating and wrap up. Thanks, everybody.
All right.
Thanks,
Good night.
Bruce.